From city, my mind is intertwined with the grid system that I write these gritty lines. What it is to be a Zimbabwe. Check it. Welcome to my life.
Charlie's up mirrors to face. Sour little sweets for the brave to taste.
Chill, listen, digest.
Mirrors to face. Sour little sweets for the brave to taste.
Chill, listen, digest.
Mirrors to face. Sour little sweets for the brave to taste.
Chill, listen, digest.
Mirrors to face. Sour little sweets for the brave to taste.
Chill, listen, digest.
The cracks in the tarmac are tracks for the hard facts, the roots of the old truth whose fruits are pothole. Whose city confessed the streets are depressed, the people who suppress
EP
their
Messenger
feelings.
Sender, released in 2015. 7-track EP. And it is called Messenger Sender. And of course, that was just a play on Don't Shoot the Messenger. But sometimes the messenger can just be the sender. Basically, if a person is giving you a message, and the importance is, are you getting the message, you know? To be angry at a person giving you information just because it angers you and reacting is completely irrational. So this was sort of, for me, it was what I term my first initial EP that had a proper professional quality to it. I've always said this, and I laugh at the way technology has moved on these days. When we were growing up and we were trying to find studios to go record, first of all, we have parents who who are not going to, you know, subsidize your recording studio sessions because it was expensive, and you know, we stem from parents, a generation of parents whose only outlet or escape from poverty was rooted in education. You had to go and do something that was doctor, lawyer, something corporate, financial, get into politics, you know, along those lines. And so you couldn't, you know, if you come from, if you come from, and I'm not speaking of us, I'm talking about my parents' generation. If you come from a generation that starved properly and struggled and had to figure out a way through life with the least that they had, it's understandable to understand where to see where they're coming from. So yeah, it was the first attempt that I had at that I'd managed to gather enough funds to, you know, produce and record, because I produced all of this by myself and recorded everything. And then I sent it to, shout out to Shazar from Track Masters and his partner. They recorded me, and they were the sound recording engineers, sound engineers, and mixing and mastering was on them. So they did a great job, especially considering what, I didn't have a lot, but they managed to work with me at the time. So it was very generous of them, and they're very cool guys. But they're hard workers, and they've done a lot of stuff. If ever you happen, Mixed Masters with a Z at the end, based in South Africa. They're Zimbabwean guys. But anyway, talking about the track, Chill, Listen, and Digest. You know, this is a track that implores people, or anyone, in fact, implores my community mainly, to literally chill, listen, and digest, you know? Like, the interesting dynamic of Zimbabwe is that, you know, there's so many different, you know, levels of division that are there, you know? I mean, some of them are divisive, but there is division. And for some reason, people tend to like their separation because it makes them feel, for some people it's superiority, you know, for some people, I don't know, you know. And for me, it's like, you know, the cracks in the tarmac, the cracks for the hard facts,
the roots of the old truth whose fruits are pothole. Whose city confessed the streets are depressed, the people who suppress their feelings at a stretch reverberate the aching muscles.
Everyone walks around feeling the same way because we're experiencing the same thing most of the time. but we don't necessarily communicate it because maybe today I'm able to afford a piece of, a piece of meat, and you only could get some beans. We're both eating, but I'm slightly better than you are. So we're not addressing it like that. There's economic disparity, and then there's the racial connotations that are already there. So ever since the infamous land reform that happened, Zimbabweans were divided initially anyway, but they were much more divided after this, because the irony of it all is the fact that we're the generation that went to school with the white kids, right? With the white Zimbabwean kids. And they descend from generations of the colonialists and all of that, right? And then now we've reached the point whereby we are the ones who are supposed to determine how the course of our history goes. And we need to figure it out without necessarily feeling like you're walking on eggshells. If you hear, maybe the eggshells are already broken. Maybe it's time for us to just simply walk through this difficult path and just be like, yo, man, we need to meet somewhere and figure out how we're moving forward. Because regardless of how things are going, and maybe it's controversial for me to say this, I don't care really, people die. The older generation, it becomes obsolete at some point. The question is our generation going to be the generation that consistently repeats the same mistakes of old? Are we going to be experiencing this divide and separation, like we aren't cool, like we could never be cool ever again or whatever? Sooner or later, our kids are going to marry each other. Can't do anything about, the course of nature. This happens. That for the longest time they tried to separate black and white. How's that going? Didn't work out. Same thing, so I address from a street level, and basically I take on the imagery of a person who's walking with a trolley, right? So I say trolley with lips to taste, sour little sweets for the great taste. It's basically, I'm like, whilst everybody is shopping for all these things, right? We're shopping for all these other things, right? And nobody's shopping for a true reflection, for an introspective moment, just to look at ourselves and be like, well, what's our ethos as a people? That's the question. Who do we want to be? What do we want to achieve? What do we want to become? Because, a country once prosperous can be prosperous again. It's just a matter of people coming together and just saying, maybe we don't necessarily need to all subscribe to the global standards of success, and just figure out what it is to be successful within our own contained, country, instead of selling it off and then also alienating each other, And I mean, I'm not trying to sing songs of Kumbaya here, but, I'm addressing some real stuff. Just like, when the NGOs and the United Nations, they come so far, so fascinated. Black man, they sail for tale so animated. You're a fairy tale dude. Don't care about you. After the news, they had to have a real interview. You're just newsworthy because it's fascinating. The fact that I can observe. I'll put it like this, and I want everybody to get this in correct context. I empathize with what's happening in Gaza, right? To the Palestinian people, it's terrible, it's atrocious. It's just that whenever the USA has an interest in a place, or they have vested interests in certain things, if Israel has certain vested interests, that's blown up in our face. Meanwhile, on African soil, Sudan is in war. Ethiopia, stuff is going on there. Stuff is going on in the DRC, right here. Somalia, just to name a few. So many terrible things happen. on African soil that are not deemed to be newsworthy or at least headline worthy. I don't see anyone wearing, any t-shirts of like free, DRC, help, Sudan. Nobody says that, Nobody cares when Africans are killing each other. It's only when, America has a vested interest in a place that, everyone is just like, oh yeah, by the way, I think we all need to call to arms to this one thing. I'm like, no, if we're gonna do this for the Palestinians, right? Then let's do it for everybody else who's in trouble, and especially when they're black. Like, I don't know why black people are always like getting the tail end of everything. And right now we're what's our social media bombarding us with? The problem with the Western woman. Like, I should care that Western women now have these standards that are whatever. That's not a life-threatening problem. You guys can literally just choose to be like, let's just be better. People are literally dying, of starvation and all of that stuff, and all you care about is being a baddie. Get the fuck out of here, man. It's ridiculous. Black America wants us to be invested in their social issues, right? When they're going through some shit, they want us to be invested. But they never, ever come to bat for us. That's just facts, A few celebrities come here and there, whatever. It's all good. You come here, you're celebrated, you're literally getting A-class treatment. We live this life. There's a difference, right? It's all good when you're in Hollywood. This ain't Hollywood. This is Africa. The continent, not the country, by the way. But I mean, chill, listen, and digest is a matter of just trying to draw each and every person just to be like, look, I don't care what your color and creed is. We just need to slow down a little bit and actually just have a conversation here. What are we doing? What are we trying to achieve? And the lyrics are there for you to literally just, to decipher the way that you want to, or decipher. A trick or treat like a sickle for the sweet, tickle pickled fantasies. It's a pretty little teat. All right? Trick or treat, tickle pickled fantasies. Is, I'm doing the play on obviously on the concept of Halloween, right? It's all, scary things, bogeyman and all of this, right? But the irony is that, at some point, like, Africa, for the longest time, the continent was regarded as the land of savagery, right? Where the true boogeyman really lived. So now we're tickling pickled fantasies. So we're pickled in a little box. We're always put in this little jar whereby it's just like, yeah, Africa, oh my God, it's a savage land. Those people are crazy, right? Trick or treat like a sickle for the sweet, tickle pickle fantasies. It's a pretty little teat. It's a pretty little teat, right? Something for you to suckle on a little bit here and there. It's pretty. Like it's a pretty concept to be throwing around to the younger generation. This is why, you have these young kids who come from Europe, the USA, who are all like young volunteers and come with the savior complex. And they come here, and basically our poverty has somehow generated jobs for kids who come from better off places in countries whereby unemployment is a major issue, and we've got governments that are allowing this to happen, and they're calling it cool. And for them, of course, they're minted, right? Because they charge a great deal of money to the NGOs, and then they pocket the money. That money never sees the light of day with the people here. For example, in Uganda, the level of unemployment is insane. Henceforth, you have this insane level of rising crime. And the thing is, like, the kids are becoming much more bolder and brazen. that when you start seeing how things are going, you are just like, wait a minute, what's the solution to this? And the solution is not to simply just throw police into the mix and just say, yeah, arrest everybody. It's not the point. Kids need something to do. It's a lot of youthful energy to figure out what they need to do. They need something to do. They have a lot of pent-up energy that's got nowhere to go. And they don't have a means to feed themselves or feed their families. Family planning is clearly not working. That's why Uganda is the youngest population in the world. So, what are people trying to do about this? In the third verse, I addressed the black and the white Zimbabwean complex on those and skirting around the process. And basically, it's just, the race relations between black and white Zimbabweans has always been a very tentative one. Testy at times, sometimes good, depending on who meets whom and whatever. And, I just think, there's a point whereby we just need to actually just bury the hatchet and move on. You can't rewrite history. History is what it is, and there's no way you can keep trying to go back and trying to correct past mistakes or whatever, or atrocities. What you can do is try to do something right, do right by each other, and just address it.
But don't they say that the people that caused this issue have to pay for it?
Yeah, but then, listen, pay for it how? You're dealing with a whole new generation that's existed without necessarily having like if my father murdered your father, does it mean that I have to pay for his sins if he dies too soon, for example? Does it mean that I have to keep, trying to repair his past? You can't do that. It's impossible, because the thing is, people, not every person is their father. Some people are just bad, some people are good. And sometimes, to be honest, I found myself on the wrong side of history in terms of like petty things, right? If you talk about like high school moments, right? Where, for example, I went to an all boys school, right? And the status quo is don't be gay, basically. You know what I mean? And everyone takes that line, right? And then you grow up and then everybody's like, no, you need to be much more, like you don't have the luxury of having the conversation with yourself and deciding, how do I actually feel about a person who's this way oriented? You know what I mean? You don't get the opportunity to do that. You don't get the luxury to do that, because the whole crowd is just saying the same ethos is being thrown at you, And sometimes this is the same thing that happens with these, huge institutional sort of movements, right? You think every white person wanted to enslave black people? Every one of them? I don't think so. I don't think every white person is hateful. I also don't think every black person is a saint. You know what I mean? This is why I keep saying, that whole black is beautiful thing is, they have to be, terms and conditions apply. Anyway, but I've said everything that I need to say about this. So that was the review for Chill, Listen, and Digest, or at least an unpackaging of some sort. I hope when you go back and you listen to that track, you can actually appreciate it for what it is.
It's a pretty little teeth. Trick or treat like a sickle for the sweet. Tickle pickle fantasies. It's a pretty little teeth.